Welcome YouTubers, gamers and fellow hobbyists out there. Welcome to this special tutorial. Special because I've not done one in such a long time. I believe it's been years since I've done a tutorial. Anyway, getting back into the swing of things again, I am looking at some of us are nostalgic when it comes to miniatures, and I wanted to do a tutorial on how to prep older miniatures, like metal miniatures. How I wanted to show my process on what I'm doing. So let's get to the bench and have a look at where we're at. Right, okay, now for whatever reason, some of us prefer metal miniatures, and I get that. For me, it's for role playing and that kind of thing, like D&D and what have you. But a lot of companies still make metal miniatures. I mean, a lot of companies do. So whether you've purchased them like new, like from a company such as Reaper, is the Dark Heaven Legends series, like this zombie werewolf here, metal, you want to do this, or should you decide, like, I don't know, like a Wargames Foundry type of metal miniature like this, which is new, or my personal favourite, I'm looking at an old Citadel Miniatures figure right here. This is a cleric from the days of old. Now, as you can see, he's on a kind of a base here, as so many of them are, and a lot of these, like this one here, has its own slot base. Call them slotter miniatures. But these were designed, well, back in the day they were molded, and they were designed to stand up on their own sort of lead or pewter base, as it were, you know, right there, like so. So you can either do that, I mean, and I find this absolutely fascinating as a nod to the nostalgia of the day, I suppose. But when it comes to metal miniatures, regardless of whether it's the new ones or this older one here, and these older ones, usually you buy them. I got this one, I acquired this one from eBay. It just took me right back, you know, several years. Well, I must have that, and I could do a tutorial on it. So as part of this tutorial, being the process of preparation, as you know, I put a lot of my miniatures onto holders. You can get the Citadel ones, or, you know, I'll typically just use a bottle lid or something like that. But my favourite ones for tasks such as this, when I get to painting him, is my good old trusty Adele Egbert's coffee jar lid glass, which I also use her palettes, with a bottle lid glued onto the top, and then I can just either blue tack my model down on that, whether I've put him on a base already or not. Now there's the other thing: do I put this model on a base, or do I want to prep him and paint him first? There's another option. To me, that doesn't really matter so much, but let's take it into consideration. What sort of base do I have him on? And I've had several over the years. When it comes to fantasy or role-playing games, you know, I've had several different options. Here's a slot base, plastic, that I could pop him on if I so wish. Glue him on there, and it doesn't matter. It's the same. I don't think that's actually a Citadel one, or a Games Workshop one, as I should say. I don't even think this is. Oh yes, it is. This is a Games Workshop one. So slightly different. They're slightly angled, slightly differently. You know, they look better. And it's just a case of gluing them on the base, really. A 2p piece will suffice just as well. In fact, there's even more weight behind it when you use that. So they form lovely bases, I find. Or you get a wooden one, You want to keep it light, you know, like so. I don't find them as durable. Look over the square one. I used to loads of square ones, particularly back in the day when I used to play a lot of Lord of the Rings figures in my D&D games and stuff like that. It's not a decision I have to make now, because as I say, whether he's glued to a base or not, he'll still be on here like so. So yeah, you know, whether we do that. But anyway, you've got either a painted metal miniature, old metal miniature, or you found one that hasn't been painted. A lot of the time back in the day, I not many of us were good enough at painting to paint our models, especially when we were kids. When I was at school, there was only one kid that could actually paint half decently, and he was a brilliant painter. So you know, we commissioned all our stuff out to him to paint. But again, having just a plain metal miniature for our games is part of the nostalgia. But now I like painting and I want to paint. So how do we prep the metal miniatures? Or how do I prep metal miniatures? Well, first of all, let's just pretend this guy was like fully painted up. What would I do? Well, I'd probably get a bath like that, or it's just, in this case it's just a Chinese pot. Pop him in it and then fill it up with this stuff, you know, Dettol. I'd give him a Dettol bath, then I would be scraping off all the paint after, you know, 24 to 48 hours, and 9 times out of 10 it literally just falls off. So what do I do to get see sometimes when you have a plastic miniature, not so much in the case of Games Workshop, but well, let's just say you've got one. This is primed obviously in black, but sometimes you get mold release residue on the models. Not so much with Games Workshop, they're pretty good off the sprue, and you have to, and they're all kind of shiny, and you don't really want that, so you need to wash them again in something like this hot, warm, soapy water. Brush them off, you know, with a toothbrush or just a brush like so. I usually use toothbrushes, and this is what I use for getting the paint off of these metal miniatures to begin with. Yeah, so you've got all the paint off, right, or you've got most of the paint off, or you've got a figure that's quite dull. It just looks like dull metal. And when it comes to metal, that is not what you want, because that is the mold release. It's like sort of a powder, I guess you'd say. So with this, I like to brush it off so I can get the primer to adhere to the model better. Otherwise it's in danger of just chipping off the model easily. So what I do is I need an abrasive substance like a wire brush, but be very, very careful when you use these. You want one like this, which is quite flexible. It's a wire brush, but it's not a hard wire brush. It's a very soft wire brush. And then you take the model like so, and you just start brushing it over like a toothbrush until he starts to become shiny. Can you see that happening on him there? Sometimes this is like what you need to get the final remnants of paint off. So you bear in mind, although you can't see it with the naked eye so much, even with a soft metal brush, you are leaving abrasions upon the surface here, but you won't see them. But you just want to get it to that point so that it will eventually look shiny, like this model here, like his brand new one. I mean, I suspect heavily this has been painted at some point, or primed at least, and then someone has attempted to take it off, but they haven't done an amazing job. It's a pretty good job, I have to say. But yeah, so we're just going to continue with this until we're happy. It doesn't have to be super perfect. You've got to be aware of detail. This is the point where you look for mold lines and that kind of thing. It's the same sort of deal as it is with a plastic one, but you just approach it in a different way. So he could have like a big mold line. In fact, I can see one sticking on the top of the helmet here. So I will approach it in two different ways. Well, I will either try and use a knife to scrape it off, because the metals they're not that hard, they're quite soft, so you can, with the blade end of the knife, you can scrape along the mold line like so, or you can get yourself a file and file it down again like so, or if none of those things work, you can get like an abrasive, like a sort of very, very fine wet and dry sandpaper type thing that you can gently rub over the model. Better for plastics, I have to say, but you can get different grades, and it doesn't take no time at all to get any residue off of your model here. I would take time to scuff the bottom up, particularly if you're planning on gluing it to a base of some sort. Like I said, I'm thinking of the 2p piece personally, because this is part of, these aren't as big as like these Games Workshop models. I mean, look at the difference in size here. But this is part of the nostalgia for me. It's still 28mm or 25mm, or it can differ between the two. So we want to get this down to the best of our ability. It doesn't have to be gleaming all over. It's like priming. It doesn't have to be spot on 100% everywhere, because you're going to prime it again, and we'll come on to that in just a moment. Right, now when you are happy with what you've done as much as you can with your software brush, I then switch out to a hard plastic brush. That's a little bit harder than the wire brush, but it's like a plastic bristles, so won't do any. It won't leave any damage to the model itself. You do it as hard as you like for as long as you like. A really, really hard toothbrush, really, which can't really get any more over here, but which is a shame, because it was handy for things such as this. And then when you've done all over the model with that, I then switch to my trusty Citadel, which is for plastic models, really for getting the all the debris off of the model, off of the sprue. But it's a really soft brush, just a final tickling with this one, and that's where I just leave that model then to decide how I'm going to approach the priming stage. Right, so next is how do I prime it, and what colour do I prime it? Well, back in the old days, there was only one colour, and that was black. Black to prime, and it was usually in the form of a rattle can, such as this. One of these that you just take outside, just hold the model, spray it, leave it to dry. But these days you've got other options. You could airbrush your primer on like so. But my personal favourite, especially when it comes to these nostalgic single models, is literally hand brush it on. Just I use an airbrush primer usually because it's perfect. It's perfect consistency coming out straight out of the bottle, and I just prime it by hand. And the reason I do that is because you can really get to know the model by brushing it by hand, and I'll explain that. So typically what I would do is I put him on his holder that I've got here, handy holder, and I'm going to do that with a bit of blue tack today. Sometimes I'll glue them on because you can just pick them off later, but a bit of blue tack on there, like so. Now I can just hold him. I wouldn't use this brush typically, but I would go around the model, exploring all the little crevices and places, thinking, right, what color can I do with these boots, these trousers, this armor, what silver am I going to use, cloak, visor, weapon, and oh, I might come across a place thinking, oh, that's a little bit tricky, I might need to switch up my brush there. And all these thought processes go through my mind as I do that. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to prime my model now, and I'm going to do it by hand. If you want to, you could prime it anyway. There's many different ways of priming, and I have a video on priming models, typically by airbrush. But like I say, you don't have to. You prime your model whatever way you want. I'd rather get to know my model than to save time. Some people laugh and think, oh, that's a waste of time. Like when you got, for instance, I'm painting a load of Chaos Space Marines. But the thing is, they're all individually different. If they were all the same, a lot of model packs were back in the old days for your armies. If you had like 10 models to paint and they were all exactly the same, I might then advocate, yeah, spray can or airbrush. Yes, that will save time. Maybe me being me, leave one to prime by hand so that I get to know the model. That's just something I like to do with a model, because I find I get better ideas and I get lost in my thoughts when I'm about to approach a model to paint. I will typically think, right, I know what the main color is going to be, so that's what I'm going to apply first. So I will prime this by hand with a brush. So there we go, magic of television, ready primed. It has yet to dry, and this was actually the color Panzer Grey, so it wasn't black, but it was quite dark. There was only, back in the day there was only black, but I'm using just ever such a slightly lighter primer so that I could see the details easier, because I have a sneaky suspicion as I went around thinking there's a lot of metallic armor plating on this model, and so that's how I'm going to approach it. So thank you for watching this tutorial on how I prep my old metal miniatures, and I look forward to seeing you on the next tutorial where hopefully I'll be painting him up. I'll go through the process of how I paint a model such as this. Thank you for watching. Do remember, all brushes lead to war, and I will see you on another video. Bye for now, my friends. Bye bye.